lesson from that.
We'll call it a nice parting gift.
Another question, and then we want to kind of get to some more fun questions. While we're taping this, we've been going through some crazy times in the country with the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is kind of another two-parter question. A lot of folks have been able to do weather from home, a lot of meteorologists. So my question is, what are your thoughts on doing weather from home, and what do you think the future of meteorology looks like? Do you think we can incorporate this more into your daily routine of what you guys do on TV? Whoever wants to start, I'll let whoever.
Well, my thoughts of weather from home is I think it's a great way to offer the service, the public service of distancing as you can. We've kind of followed the guidelines at work from our middle and upper managers, and we're kind of as weather in terms of directives, the last off the boat, really. A lot of our anchors have been broken up, and our reporters have been taken away. Some of our producing has been doing sales, etc. But they've left us in place. But I mean, I think it's great when it can be done. I know Gabe has a great setup that he's probably going to speak to, and but I'm enjoying watching some of the setups and the creative things that people have in other media markets. Every little bit helps, I suppose.
Yeah, Gannon's right about that. I for sure think that this entire outbreak is going to change the landscape. Are we going to be doing this completely at home from now on? No, but certainly we have a baseline of what to do in the event that we can't be at the station. I mean, it's really no different than doing live shots, but the key is going to be for stations to help as much as they can, their meteorologists, their anchors, reporters, utilize the technology they have or provide them with the technology they have that is comparable to what they would have if they were in the building.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Gabe. Again, I think it is incumbent upon the stations to make sure that the meteorologists have the tools that they need, the computers, the broadcasting equipment they need to broadcast from home. I love the idea. Of course, I think you always run into the issue, of course, is probably severe weather. It's probably a little easier to obviously broadcast from home on a quieter weather day, but when you start getting a severe weather situation, especially, it kind of feels like it's more incumbent to be at the station where you have all of the tools that you would really need to do a broadcast, especially on short notice.
Yeah, just to piggyback off what they were saying, I have personally seen a lot of very impressive work from home setups. And I think, at least for me, going in, you normally think you're a broadcasting major. Everything that you do needs to be done from the studio. And now that we, kind of are taking that step forward to work from home, there's so many different, opportunities and doors open on how much can you expand this? What more can you do from home? And then you also think, how long is this going to last for? And, if it's, tech trends to be something that pops up more in the winter or in the summer or whatever it would be, would people just start to transition to working from home during that, time where people would more likely get sick than, during the off season, if you will, from that coronavirus?
It's amazing how many different setups there are too. I mean, I even saw a picture of someone using augmented reality in California and their weather hits. It's impressive. So transitioning away from some of the weather talk, and Kelly, I'll put this right back to you. What are some of your favorite non-weather hobby?
Well, I've recently started painting at home just to keep myself busy. And I've also realized that I'm pretty good at doing puzzles, since that's kind of one of the only things that I can do now. But I also love doing anything at the beach. Anybody who knows me knows anything coastal or nautical or ocean related. Like, my name is just all over it. I really want to start surfing. That's like the next thing on my list.
Are you able to get to the beach right now?
I know. Well, Ganna said there's parking in Carolina Beach, so I'm going to try and get down there like ASAP, because I usually go probably like 3 days out of the week, and I haven't been in like 2 months. So I'm starting to go a little stir crazy there.
The waves are good today. So
I know.
it could be a good day to learn. I'm seeing
Even
that.
just body surfing would be fine with me. Just something to get into. I love being in water and around water.
Awesome. Good choices. Eric?
Well, I don't get to do it enough, but I like to play tennis with my son. Obviously, in recent years, I've been having raising my kids, but now they're kind of getting older. So actually, probably in the future, I'm going to have a little more time to myself. But yeah, I love sports. I like golf. I'm a terrible golfer. I haven't golfed much recently, but I do love the sport. Obviously, I love just getting out, walking around. And obviously, when I go to neighborhood swimming pool, beach, things like that. Pretty simple guy. Wouldn't say I'm real complicated, but those are the kind of things I like.
We found out during a photo shoot that Eric has got some pretty awesome hoop skills.
Oh,
yeah. This
was. Need to get in shape. I got to get in shape though. That's the first thing.
Well, yeah,
is there
but
any video of this?
I feel like someone recorded some cell phone video with it. I'm not 100% certain, but
I could shoot a little ball in a day. I could.
Yeah, it was October and November. I'm a perpetual band kid, so my athletic talent is slim and none unless it's pro wrestling because it's predetermined and I know how to do it. So
you was fitting in well with the WFNY crew last week. Every single one of them played an instrument. They were all in the band back in the day. So we're trying to get a band together, a weather meteorologist band. So we'll maybe reach out.
Not me.
Oh well, I'm your guy. Any drums or any percussive needs, I've got you covered.
Okay. Gannon, what about you? Favorite non-weather?
If you guys get a band together, I'll just call the bars to see if I can get you in. That'll be my role. I'm not very musically inclined. I like a lot of the things that my cohorts said they like. I like sports. Play a little sports. This past week I did tennis, but I like watching sports, keeping up with sports. Around the house, grilling and chilling, gardening. I like to exercise, so try to do that. I got a little elliptical machine that I try to hit at. Even if you're tired, it just feels good to get drenched with sweat when you can, a couple of days a week at the very least. And then just the salt water, having that, I really like it. I'm with Kelly. Made it down to the beach yesterday. They kind of have a just keep moving along directive going on right now. So there's no coolers or beach blankets, but that's real nice when you can do that, because that's just a real good way to unplug, is being near water. I've always found that to be the case.
Very nice. Well, in a similar light, is there what makes this city that you live in so great? And do you have any favorite spots to go to? Anything you can recommend to the viewers?
I'll say Wilmington is great in its variety of things to do for a city of its size. I think it's a relatively small city, and you might pick something out of Charlotte or Atlanta or Washington, D.C. that Wilmington wouldn't have had a chance of even having. So, I mean, I know there's scale to be had, but there's plenty to do. And then the variety of landscape with the different water bodies, the ocean, the intracoastal, the river, so close, that naturally lends itself to a lot of different things to do. I'd say one of my favorite spots is the part of the downtown riverfront and historic district portion of Wilmington. It's all within a few city blocks of each other, and it's extremely walkable. And there's just a variety of places to dip into and eat and drink. It's a good vibe down there.
Wonderful. Do you want to jump in, Kelly?
I was going to say, I love Wilmington. I'm not a city person at all. But, visiting from time to time is cool, I guess. But, Wilmington just has, beautiful downtown features. They have the Riverwalk, numerous different kind of restaurants you can go in. They have a raid room. They have, again, what did we do the one time? The knife throwing thing.
Oh, you can throw axes.
Axes
and
axes.
Yeah.
Multiple axe throwing opportunities in Wilmington.
Yes.
Axe throwing. Then you have, the beaches. Any beach you go to is going to be a beautiful beach. I love how the people here really take care of the beaches. Like, I rarely ever see any trash on the beaches, and it's great. People pick up after themselves there, and we keep our beaches clean. And, not too far away from here, you can go to Raleigh. You have Myrtle Beach to your south. It's just a really good location, and being in a southern coastal town, for me, it's something that I've always wanted to, experience living in, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, I completely agree with what my colleagues have said. I kind of like the Fort Fisher State Park myself. I think that's kind of a hidden treasure in a way. One nice thing about Fort Fisher is, you probably, of course, hear about like you go to Carolina Beach or Riceville Beach, you have to pay a lot of money to park. But obviously, Fort Fisher is a state park. You can park there for free, so that's a good beach experience. And plus, it's not quite as crowded either. So that's kind of a nice place to walk around, or if you want a little quieter beach experience.
I'm for sure more of a Wrightsville Beach kind of guy. I live near Wrightsville Beach, so I can very easily run or jog to the beach and get in and around there, kind of the Mayfair area. Also, really just from here up through like Surf City, North Topsail, some of those places. They're a lot of fun. I don't want to say a lot of folks my age, but 30-somethings, you're going to find some 30-somethings, in that neck of the woods. So it's pretty cool to get out there. And yeah, most people keep to themselves. And the one thing that was remarkable when I came down here 5 years ago from Ohio, I was just floored at just how nice everybody is. You don't get that kind of niceness in Columbus, Ohio, when you walk past somebody in Walmart. Oftentimes it's what are you looking at me for? Like, what's going on? Here it's like, hi, how are you? Oh, wow, I didn't get cursed out. That's incredible. So it was a nice change of pace. So I love the people down here and the scenery just as much.
Well, what they say is that people who are at the coast often are have a little bit more of a relaxed personality and are generally happier, right? And it sounds like we all need to try the river walk too if we haven't done that. I know that's I'll have to put that on my list.
Worth it.
But I think, Evan, you have one more question to follow up with, and we'll go with that.
Yeah. So one last, very short, very silly question to kind of end us off for the eve or the afternoon, I guess. Gannon, start with you. Really philosophical here. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh shoot! You were really going to ask that?
Oh yeah, we were joking around there. Yeah.
I'm gonna say yeah. Like a square is a rectangle, but it's a square.
What goes on? What goes on your hot dog, Gannon? Tell us what's your toppings.
Oh man, I haven't had a hot dog in years, but I had like brats, so same kind of thing. It's mustard and sometimes pickle relish, but definitely mustard.
I like the rectangle is a square is a rectangle, whatever. That's good. That's good logic.
I got mathematical on you.
I'm going to say yes, because if it's between two pieces of bread, in my mind, that qualifies as a sandwich. Very, very simple criteria. If I have to have a hot dog, I'd probably say chili, mustard, and some onions. Got to throw some onions on there too.
Okay.
Well, by that criteria, quesadilla is a sandwich too, then, right?
Oh,
sure.
Yeah, that's for the next show.
It's got to be bread. Hot dog
Bread.
lunch kind of
It's
bread.
a parallelogram.
Gabe, Kelly?
I'm stumped. Would never consider a hot dog a sandwich, but I guess if you think about it, kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know.
In elementary school, when they'd send out the list of what's for lunch or whatever, they actually would have for us hot dog sandwich, which is okay. Small town Ohio, great, but I guess it would be considered a sandwich in that regard. I mean, if that's the same thing with with a hamburger. I guess it's technically a sandwich between two pieces of bread, like Eric said. So. In my case, I'm with Eric though. I like chili on my hot dog, and I am a cheese fiend. So whether it's nacho cheese, cheddar cheese, you name it, load it on there, good to go.
So Gabe, on my hot dogs, I do the cheese rotel dip. You can mix the rotel and the cheese to get with a little bit of chili. It's good.
Oh yeah. Oh, and bacon too. Duh. We're planning in my front. A little bit of bacon on there, just for some taste.
Kelly, what's on your hot dog? I know
my
I
hot-
stumped you, but
I'm still
what's-
figuring out if a hot dog's a sandwich over here. I haven't even gone past the first question. But I guess, I don't know, kind of just a classic hot dog kind of gal, onions, mustard, ketchup. What's that one hot dog place in Southport that's now in Wrightsville Beach, guys? You know what I'm talking about? The Trolley Stop or something like that?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of really cool, different kind of hot dogs there. So, I don't know. Is a hot dog a sandwich, though?
This is a question that's going to have to come back every time we do this now. So,
I bet
like
for
y'all's
you-
answers. These were good.
I bet for you guys watching, you never thought we was going to talk about hot dogs on this show. But we are going to start to close up, so would love to give each and every one of you the opportunity, if our followers and listeners find themselves in Wilmington, how can they find you on the social media platforms so they know what the weather's going to be like when they're visiting the Wilmington area? Gannon, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Scotty, and thanks, guys, for the opportunity to hang out. I'd like to revise my answer on the hot dogs to include chili, first of all. But also, if you're in Wilmington, you have any interest in Wilmington weather, I'm at Medwick, just my last name, on Twitter, at Gannon Medwick, all one word, on Instagram, and then meteorologist Gannon Medwick, -WECT, is the search for Facebook. So I'm on all of those three places.
Forgot my Instagram. I'm going to have to remember that. But on Twitter, I'm at Eric Davis, WECT, ERICDAVIS, WECT. Meteorologist Eric Davis -WECT. You can find me on Facebook. I'll have to get back to you on the Instagram. I forgot for the moment.
I have it, Eric. It's WX Eric D 10.
WX Eric D10. There you go. That's Instagram. Thank you, Gabe.
Quick search.
My Twitter is at Kelly_WX. And for those that may be watching that doesn't know what WX means, it means weather. And my Facebook is just meteorologist Kelly McLinn. So if you do come to the Wilmington area, you won't be disappointed. And hopefully you won't be disappointed in what the weather is that day. But otherwise, it's a beautiful place.
I try to make all my social media as consistent as possible, so you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at TV's Gabe Ross, TVS Gabe Ross, GABEROSS, YouTube, and all the other fun stuff you can find on that too.
Well,
and I just want to say too, I'm not like other Kellys who spell their name with a Y.
Oh
My
yeah.
name is KELLIE, so that may help you find me too.
All right.
There you go. Well, we appreciate you you all joining us this afternoon. For everyone who is watching, thank you for joining us, and catch us next time as we wrangle up another group of meteorologists and ask them these silly questions. Have a good day. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. This is the Wednesday, April 8th, 2020 edition of our little weather get-together. We hope you are all staying safe out there. Tonight we're going to be talking about storm chasing and COVID-19. We know that the pandemic is ongoing throughout the United States, and we are entering severe weather season. So we're going to talk to some storm chasers tonight, some familiar faces and some new faces. We want to welcome in Kevin Smith. He's with the National Weather Service in Pocatello, Idaho. We have on with us Tim Marshall, storm chaser, meteorologist, and engineer. If you are familiar with the weather community, you know Tim goes out and performs damage surveys after these big tornado events. So happy to have Tim on and let him talk a little bit about that towards the end of the show. And our good friend Mike Olubinski is with us. He's back with us, storm chaser, videographer, located out in Arizona and goes out throughout the plains throughout the storm season, capturing all the sounds and the sights of tornadoes and severe weather. So we're happy to have Tim and Mike and Kevin on with us. We may be joined by an additional guest later on in the program. But bring in our guests. I want to bring in Tim Marshall, Michael Levinsky, and Kevin Smith with us tonight. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. We're happy to have you. How's everyone doing this evening?
I'm still alive.
Well, that's good. We like to hear that.
Doing
Tim,
great. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, Mike.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Tim, we'll start with you. You are in Texas right now. Tell us a little bit for your first-time guest. So tell us a little bit about your weather history, your weather background, how you got caught up in this crazy weather community that we're all involved in.
Yeah, we've come a long way, haven't we? Many, many years. Well, I've always been interested in the weather. Ever since I was small, I really kept weather records in my house. My parents asked me what I wanted for Christmas. I told them a barometer. They said, "What's that?" And I go, "It's a device that measures barometric pressure, air pressure." And I got a barometer, so I kept daily records. I wrote to TV weatherman. They wrote me back in those days. And then Ted Fujita was at the University of Chicago, and I was in a suburb of Chicago, Oak Lawn. I got hit by a F4 tornado on April 21, 1967. I was about 9 or 10. And I knew right then and there I wanted to study tornadoes the rest of my life and figure out what these things are. And I didn't realize at that time I was going to chase them down, but that came later. But I wanted to go to school and learn about tornadoes, and that's what I did.
That's awesome. And Tim, we want to get more into what you do after the tornado later on in the show. Let's bring in Kevin Smith. He's with the National Weather Service in Idaho. Kevin, currently in Idaho, but you also have some ties here to North Carolina. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so great to be on, and thanks for having me on the show tonight. So grew up in central New York, Syracuse area, right in the middle of New York State, and right on the edge of the lake effect snow belts, which might have helped spur a little bit of my early interest in the weather. And I'm not really sure what really got me into it. You know, a lot of people have stories of a big tornado or a big storm or some trigger for them that really launched them into their meteorology careers, their storm chasing careers and whatnot. And not sure really what it was for me, but ever since elementary school, knew I wanted to be a meteorologist and was particularly interested in the National Weather Service, just for the public service side, public protection side of everything. So went to college down in NC State, Raleigh. So there's my connection to North Carolina. Started in 2007, working on my meteorology degree, and was there for 4 or 5 years. So, got to know a lot of great people down there. And Dan Whitaker and I believe we met possibly doing some local chasing back during that time when I was in college. Got some exposure at the Raleigh Weather Service office, doing some volunteer work there, whatnot, and got involved in the ham radio side of weather spotting and the Skywarn programs there in central North Carolina as well. And so graduated in 2012, and just like a lot of people are facing, very competitive these days to get into the National Weather Service. And it took several years of applying and kind of refining my credentials and gaining some more experience in different areas. And during that time, I spent some time actually firefighting and doing private security as my paid job during that period. So a little bit of a break, and then was able to get a job offer at the National Weather Service out here in Pocatello, Idaho, just a little over 3 years ago. And I've been out here ever since.
Do you know one of my best friends out there?
I'm sorry?
Do you know one of my best friends out there, Jeff Hedges?
Yes. Jeff was there when I first started. He's retired now, but I was able to work with him for, I believe, a little bit over a year out there.
Yeah, Jeff and I went to school together at NIU.
Yeah, so small, tight-knit community in this meteorology world we live in.
Yep.
And I have about 12 or 13 years of storm chasing experience as well that I've continued on the side. So.
Do you know Elizabeth Padian?
I have met her. I believe she is or was working at the Boise Weather Service office. And I've met
Boise.
Her.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, yeah. I shot her wedding like years ago, and she was always, she said she was up from one of those offices, and for some reason, Pocatello always seemed to be where she was from or something in my head. So that's why I remember.
Yeah. No, I have met her as well.
Well, Mike, I'm going to start off with first question for you. Our guests may remember you from December. But I want to ask all three of you guys your different roles. Each one of you have a different role in storm chasing, a different agenda, idea of what you want to do. So, Mike, I'll start with you. Kind of tell us, you live in Arizona, so you make the trek out to the plains every year. Kind of tell us about the role that you want as you're out storm chasing.
I was just talking to someone today. They were saying something about You know, I bet you'd probably still go chasing if you didn't have a camera. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I would love to watch a storm if I didn't have a camera. But
we'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now, your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Getting tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. Help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.
The planes and all that stuff. My big thing is I love to capture that stuff. Photos, time lapse, and share that stuff. That's kind of what, drives me. So my whole kind of motivation every year is to go out and do that. And it's, my job has kind of evolved since I've been, started doing this over 10 years ago out here. And I'm, from Arizona, we get amazing monsoon thunderstorms. And that's what I grew up loving out here, was lightning and dust storms and all that. And so, of course, once I saw a supercell and a tornado, I was like, well, that's the next best thing. So, but my job has kind of evolved where I'm out there mainly for me to get footage, but I've also turned into taking people along on tours. I kind of, do more like, I guess I would kind of call them private tours, where there's 1 or 2 or 3 people coming along. Try to keep them small because I still want to get, the footage I want to get. And we've also played guide to having some people follow us that want to get the same kind of footage that we're getting. And we're definitely, when I say we, I mean, sometimes I have my buddy Brett ride along, or me by myself, but we, we kind of have a different mindset. I know Tim, a lot of these guys are right under the tornado. They want to get close up footage. They're getting the damage. They're getting all the crazy stuff. And we're usually in front of it because we want to stay out of the rain and the hail, because we want to capture these images. So the footage we're getting is a little bit of a, different type than what other people get, but it's a heck of a lot of fun, and I'm hoping, badly that I will be able to get some more this spring.
I'll bring in Brett Adair. He's joining us. I think he's actually out in the field right now, doing a little bit of chasing. Brett, a guest of our show, so if you've been following us, you've seen Brett before. Brett, you do live storm media, doing some stuff for Weather Nation. What's your objective? What's your goal as you go out in the fields and chase?
Well, the number one objective has been report. Obviously, we want to get in front of these storms and, in some cases get close and others maybe not so close. Today, the objective was we had some inverted V-type soundings earlier in the day, so we knew hail and damaging winds were going to be the key elements and components for earlier today. So we did a little chasing in the severe thunderstorm watch down in Alabama just to do a little bit of reporting if we had anything. Now we're shifting into nighttime mode, where we're moving up I-65 north of Birmingham, headed toward Huntsville, and we're going to go up and see if we can't, confirm anything that might happen. We got increasing shear in the overnight hours, and we're still really unstable. 2,000 to 3,000 Cape out here as these storms push out of Tennessee and Arkansas. So we're going to be doing anything that we can to confirm any type of damage and see if we get any wind or hail reports up here.
And so we know chasing kind of a different scenario this year with the coronavirus going on. Maybe some different rules, perspectives coming through. Tim Marshall, I know you was able to head up to Jonesboro, Arkansas. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. But as you're out in the field, what is your guidelines, or what are you wanting to look for as you're out in the field?
Well, we've had to change
now.
Oh, my bad.
Oh, go ahead. Now, right now, I'm on this EF scale committee, and what we try to do is get pictures of certain buildings that are damaged by tornadoes. So that's my mission, and that's why I was in Nashville, I was in Jonesboro and Dallas, looking for these specific damage indicators, as we call them, and get photos of that. We have plenty of photos of damaged houses and manufactured homes. What we want to do is look at more details, like your Walgreens and your cantilever lights that we have, street lights, those kinds of things that we need photos for. So that's what I'm doing, is I'm surveying to get specific photographs.
Awesome. That's some great perspective there. Some good information that we get from your storm surveys. Dan, I know you friends with Kevin, and maybe you guys can kind of talk about that side of the conversation tonight.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So it's nice to have a great round view of perspectives here of all the different types of chasing that the people here do, as well as the professional associations with their job in storm chasing. It's one of the perspectives that I thought was really important to have tonight was bringing on Kevin Smith, who's a meteorologist at the National Weather Service. I've known Kevin for a while. We've ran in storms together. We've in North Carolina, we both would end up on some of the same storms as we were chasing it. He's always been someone who has thought very critically to spotter reports and reports to be used for the National Weather Service. So that being said, kind of Kevin, what do you think, just for you to speak to it, your overall kind of perspective on storm reports and the importance of those and how those are used for the National Weather Service? What is kind of your history and your, where you feel that importance lies with those reports?
Yeah. So going back to before I was in the Weather Service, my focus chasing has always been on reporting. And I know, we all chase for different reasons. There's research applications. There's chasing with tour groups as a means of making money and whatnot. Obviously, a lot of research going on and whatnot. People looking for photos and videos. My focus has always been on the public reporting side, just because I knew back in the day that it had a lot of importance for the local Weather Service offices. And I'm also just personally very driven by things that help people. So putting on my Weather Service hat, now that I'm working out in Pocatello, spotter reports are huge. And, there's this distinction. There's skywarn spotters, there's storm chasers. A lot of people kind of put them in two different bins. And there is a difference. Spotters are usually going about their daily life and just when they happen to come across something, when they happen to see something going on in their neighborhood or on the way to work or on the way to their family, they'll go ahead and report that. Whereas chasers put more time and money into following storms over great distances, counties and states and whatnot. And again, sometimes for different reasons. So from the Weather Service perspective, ground truth reports are huge. They are not going away. The importance of spotter reports are not going away. We talk about all these great advances these days in radar technology, dual pole radar, phased array radar. We have satellite imagery that's incredible resolution now with even 1 minute updates if we want that type of data during severe weather. And even with these advances, there's nothing that's come along, and probably nothing that's going to come along in any of our lifetimes that's going to replace ground truth reports. So the Skywarn program, the practice of calling in reports, whether it's to the media or directly to the Weather Service offices, remains incredibly important for our operations at the Weather Service. And I think that's going to remain incredibly important going forward, even with the advances.
Well, thanks for explaining that really well. I guess kind of the purpose of tonight's conversation, how everything kind of comes back around is, how things are going to change this storm season with the threat of coronavirus and the way things are going this storm season already. And hopefully that changes in a few weeks or a month, and, staying ultra optimistic that by late May or June, things will be a lot closer to where they were, before all of this. But that's just the optimistic storm chaser in me. All that being said, I think one of the important things is, what if we're talking 5 years from now and we're looking back at this storm season, what are going to be the biggest takeaways? What are the most important things that may have happened weather-wise from a lot of people staying home, from a lot of research potentially being halted. So that being said, Kevin, kind of back to you about this reporting, just kind of starting there, as we're all trying to make sense of severe weather and trying to figure out the best way to make sense of ground reports and get those in. How do you think that might be affected this storm season?
Kind of our security, and that we just have.
It's really hard to tell. So obviously, and probably everyone on this panel is aware, there's a lot of debate right now going on among the spotter community, storm chaser community on to chase or not to chase, and CDC guidelines, and how is the overall season going to be impacted? With everything going on with COVID. In terms of the reports that are streaming into the Weather Service offices, it's hard to tell. We get a lot of reports from the local spotters in each CWA. So each county warning area, the area that each weather service office is in charge of in terms of forecasting and warning operations. I don't speculate that would change significantly, particularly with a lot of people at home. Our spotters that usually call in reports are hopefully going to continue to call in reports throughout the pandemic as long as they can do so safely. In terms of maybe having less chasers out in the field, it's really hard to speculate on that. Whether that's going to have an impact on the overall verification process or just the amount of reports that are coming in. Officially, from the Weather Service standpoint, we strongly recommend everyone to follow all the CDC guidelines and all the local guidelines related to the pandemic. That's kind of a first priority before we get into, I need to report the wall cloud. But outside of that, pandemic or no pandemic, we want those ground truth reports whenever they can be sent.
Kevin, one of the things that you said that stuck with me was the importance that in normal times, these observations can provide to you guys at the National Weather Service. I'd like to have you speak a little bit more to that in just a second, but what I'd like to do to kind of draw a parallel between the two conversations we're having is play a sound clip today from here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where Mecklenburg County Health Director Gibby Harris actually drew a line between what hurricane forecasting is like and what trying to forecast the coronavirus is like, and it plays off of exactly what I think you were just talking about how today's observations determine tomorrow's forecast. This runs about a minute. It's a little long, but I want to let our weather-centric audience hear this sound.
We have built the modeling that we're using in this community based on methods that were developed by a team of researchers at the University of Pennsylvania. The CDC has also used this model. We're working with our partners at Atrium and Novant, and it requires data from all three of our systems to run these models. We've adjusted the models with our local data and are monitoring the projections daily. Every time we put in new data and adjust the assumptions based on what we're seeing in our community, the forecasts can shift. These models are not unlike what you see when we have a hurricane. When you see models from a hurricane, you see where the hurricane is and then the cone that goes out from the hurricane. That means that it could happen anywhere within that cone based on the modeling that they're able to do. And the further you go out with the modeling, the wider that cone becomes. That's what we're dealing with in this situation. We have limited data, and we're using what we're seeing in other communities to help us with that modeling. But you have to know that this is a moving target for us, and we're doing the best we can with what we have.
So, Kevin, those observations, whether they come from humans or machinery, really do play a role in the weather world to help with tomorrow's forecasting. Is that right?
That's right, yes. And I think we're padded a little bit as far as spotter reports go. And what I mean by that is, obviously, when we're reducing weather balloon launches, which are directly inputted into the models that we use, if we're reducing observations coming from aircraft, because air travel is down so much right now with the pandemic going on. Things like that are direct inputs into the weather models are going to have a pretty clear and documented impact, I think, on some of the accuracy and just the performance of the overall model. When we circle back around to ground truth reports from spotters and from storm chasers, again, it's hard to ascertain. We're not plugging a spotter report or a chaser report directly into a model. And again, with the majority of spotters being on the spotter end of that spectrum and reporting from home, reporting from work, again, we're hoping that we don't see a big reduction in those types of reports coming in during the pandemic. But I can think of multiple examples all the way back to high school when I was a spotter back in high school. And then I kind of started to stray more and more into storm chasing as we went into college and then my adult life so far. There's a lot of different examples I can think of where actions were taken by the Weather Service immediately based on my report. And that's a really great feeling. As far as, we know spotter reports are valuable. I'm telling you they're valuable right now as a Weather Service employee. But being able to see that in real time. So, for example, back in Cicero, New York, just north of the Syracuse area, called in my rain gauge observation one day. This was back, I believe, toward the end of high school, and said, hey, we've had a thunderstorm. Our total accumulation over the last 45 minutes was measured as this much. And this is what I'm seeing in terms of minor flooding around the neighborhood. And within 3 minutes, an urban and small stream flood advisory was issued. And When you read into the text of the advisory, it said, at such and such a time, a trained weather spotter reported this much rain fell in 45 minutes. The weather spotter reported there is street flooding in Cicero. And multiple examples like that over my time as a spotter, where you can see that direct effect that report has. So I think it's kind of in a different category. Regardless of how the weather models are responding to changes in the data inputs right now due to the pandemic, I think spotting is always valuable. Calling in reports, whether you're a spotter or chaser, is always valuable, pandemic or no pandemic, and hopefully that's going to continue uninterrupted as we go forward this year.
Hey, Kevin, one more question for you before we move over to Brett, Mike, and Tim. As a forecaster at the National Weather Service, if come May, some of these stay-at-home orders haven't been repealed and we can't get storm spotters out in the field, how will that affect the warning process?
Yeah, so again, hard to say. I think the majority, my impression from my experience is the majority of our local Skywarn spotters that report into each weather service office, again, are local. And so I don't think there's going to be a huge interruption in general in terms of their ability to report what they're seeing in their backyard, the type of weather that's impacting their neighborhood and whatnot. And again, it's hard to categorize, if people are not going out as much as they would, if some of the local spotters are not driving the neighborhood looking for damage, maybe because of the pandemic, or if we're cutting down on the chaser presence out in the field, just from the storm chasers, whether they're local or coming in from another state. It's very hard to tell what type of impact that would have. But the final thought on that, again, is whether you're a storm chaser, whether you're a spotter, whether you're someone looking to get involved in that process, these reports matter a lot. We use them every single high impact weather event and operations at all the weather service offices, and it's a great thing to get involved in. And if you want me to at some point, I can speak a little bit more to that and how to get involved as well.
Yeah, actually, Kevin, near the end of after we talk about some more things, we'll be talking about that specifically. And for any of the listeners, it would be great for us to give them things to do they can do from home to become involved with better reporting and stuff like that. So we'll be actually speaking to that. I think it's a great and very useful thing that we can all kind of try and figure out what we can all do while we stay at home. So, but over to you, Brett. You're out in the car. You're pursuing storms right now. Just as a kind of overall question, what is so important about today and about what you're doing that you're in the car and following these storms right now? What from a media perspective and from a meteorologist's perspective is the reason you're out there, and why is that so important?
Yeah, Dan, it's one of those situations where now, some people are definitely scared to go in the field because, the advisement has been to stay at home in most states. For us, we're still essential. We still have to report. We still have to, give the news, whether it be the news or weather news. And we're having to take really drastic steps to change things in the field ourselves. Normally, when we go out, we do this, we're, covering the storms, and then we may be covering damage. And then in most cases, we're going to go and, try to find a place to have a meal, try to find a place to sleep for the night, get ready for the next day, or get ready to head home. For us, over the last month and a half, my wife already has a bit of an issue with lupus. So she has an underlying condition. So I'm having to be extremely careful. We have tons of hand sanitizer, gloves, N95 masks. We've been sleeping in tents on air mattresses at campgrounds that were open. Now we're going to likely have to do some primitive type camping when we go out for the next month or 2 months or however long. We also are having to bring our own food because in many cases we just don't, either A, you don't have restaurants open to do curbside when we're finished with our day, or B, the comfort level of trying to get food right now is just not there because personally I think you could easily spread a virus through, food contamination. So, we're just having to be extremely careful wiping down gas pumps before we use them, wiping down credit card readers because we've still got to pump fuel. It has really changed the way that we operate, and we're having to really slow down and be more attentive to the things that normally would be second nature to us when we're in the field. So personally, I'm a little more worried about other things than the storms, and you have to pay attention and really think about things more in depth. And it also, I second guess myself sometimes. I don't want to become complacent about the weather and then have an issue there as well. So it's becoming very challenging, but we still have to be out here, reduce number of spotters. One thing that has not happened yet, and luckily for all of us it hasn't, what if we had a radar failure during, a time of this where we don't have as many spotters and eyes out in the field on storms if we had severe weather? Luckily our equipment hasn't failed us yet. Let's just continue to hope we get through this without any of those type of issues as well.
Yeah, that's right. So, Tim, to kind of speak to you, you've already been out chasing as well. You've done your damage assessments. You've seen some of these effects probably as well. Is there anything like what Brett was talking about that you think you've had to change, or that's limited your ability to do your job or to pursue the storms?
Absolutely. Everything Brett was saying with regard to carrying hand sanitizer. I have an N95 mask and have gloves, have surgical gloves, have a whole box of them. So every time I go to fuel up, I put on a surgical glove and then go ahead and proceed to use that and then throw it away after I fill up the vehicle. Fast food is the order of the day, obviously, and that's not good for my health. My doctor would certainly frown on that, but that's the way chasing is. So some of the fast food restaurants are still open fairly late at night, and even the Sonics we found are open, and not my first choice to go eat there, but if it's the only thing around, you want something warm there you go. Hotels I have not found to be a problem yet. I've been finding that many hotels welcome to have a visitor because they don't have hardly anybody in the hotels. So I'm not too concerned about that. So far, we've done pretty well. We've had a couple chases already, and it's been fun. But I think what happens is we'll see how things work over the next few weeks and months, and see how bad it gets or if it improves any.
And so, Mike, I want to bring you in because Tim lives in Texas, Brett's in Alabama. You're in Arizona, so you have to do a lot of traveling to get to where you need to be. What do you think the effects may be for you? Have you already experienced some of them? Kind of tell us, walk us through your game plan.
Well, at least I haven't experienced them. I haven't been out chasing yet. I've kind of put a goal in my head of not chasing until May, just so I don't even think about it right now. I just want to wait till things maybe get a little better. Plus, I have 3 kids. They're out of school, and my wife works at our church where there's only a couple people working, so she still goes in every day. And so I'm kind of hunkered down, helping them, get caught up on schoolwork that they need to do. I'm the one going to the store to get groceries and all that. So it's actually been really fun, but also kind of, still trying to work and stuff on my own, which has been a little bit stressful with the kids. But, I'm trying to look at this time a little bit with some silver lining as a gift that I get to spend time with them and help them out. But all the precautions they're taking, I've been taking. I'm starting, I'm freaking out. I sound a little sick. I have allergies out here. But on Friday night, I thought I was like, oh my God, my chest is caving in and I've got all these symptoms, and had like a panic attack on Friday night. So, since then I realized I just have allergies. It's real bad out here for everybody. But I do everything, go to the store and wash my hands before I go in. I try not to touch anything. I've trained myself not to touch my face. And it's just crazy how much your face itches once you've trained yourself not to touch your face inside a grocery store. And then I cannot immediately wash my hands and make sure and wash my phone if I've touched it, or credit card or whatever. So, but for me, at least coming up, it's going to be different. I usually will do tours for 7 days, 10 days. I don't know if any of those are going to happen. They don't usually start until mid-May. So right now I'm, one of the guys coming, he was a 77-year-old man who's come on a couple of my workshops before. He's like, I don't want to come and I don't want to stay in hotels, and which is great. I don't want him to risk anything he doesn't want to. But, for me, when I started doing this, I started in Arizona chasing by myself. And when I started coming out the plains, I had a buddy or two, but really my first time ever coming out was by myself. And I learned to chase solo and how to navigate, look at radar, and do all the stuff at the same time. For me, I'm almost thinking,
We'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now, here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Getting tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. Help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov. ms.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.
Back to how I used to chase. And right now, the plan is to bring a cooler of food and a sleeping bag and a pillow and sleep in the back of my 4Runner. And if I need a, motel, I might even go in and bring my pillow and my sleeping bag, so I don't really have to touch the bed, and make sure I wipe everything down. And like Tim said, I have a neighbor who works with hotels, and I know that some of them out there, they're going to need money, they need support as well. And so, in a way, hopefully we're kind of helping them out at the same time of being, safe and all that. So, my plan is to just kind of try to do that as much as I can. I've gotten used to driving out there, especially to, kind of to Denver, chasing, coming back to Denver, leaving my truck somewhere and flying home for, $100 a flight one way, which is pretty cheap, staying home for a few days, flying back out and chasing. So I don't have to do the crazy drives back and forth across New Mexico and everything. But this year I'm probably going to have to get used to doing that again. So I think it's possible it's going to be a little bit different than before, but my plan really is to, hopefully wait till May, maybe first, second week of May. I love late May and June anyway. It's about my favorite time to chase. Usually it's more picturesque, or it can be. But that's just kind of my goal. And if it's safe to go, I'm going to feel real good about it, but I'm definitely going to be ultra paranoid the whole time I'm out there, and try to avoid any, big chaser meetups, no Applebee dinners, none of that stuff. It's just going to be kind of staying below radar, just chasing and having fun and trying to just do what I really love, which is just be out there all night getting lightning photos. And honestly, storm chasing, at least to me, is one of the most socially distancing hobbies you can possibly have. That also, at least for me, is a job. So I get to go do that and really have an excuse to be away from everybody and not have to do anything. But other than, Tim and Brett said, wash your hands before touching a gas pump and avoid, that kind of stuff as much as possible. So at least that's my plan right now, but we'll see. It's, it's only early April. Who knows what's going to change?
Yeah, definitely in a changing world. Kevin, I want to bring you in, and then we're going to go to a quick break. With the Weather Service, I know some things have to be kept internally, but as we get into storm season with the Weather Service, we see these bigger severe weather days. Sometimes the Weather Service brings in additional staff to help monitor social media, Skywarn, things like that. Does the Weather Service have any clue or any ideas or plans on how to address these bigger severe weather event days during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, so the guidance we've been given is operations continue. So broadly in the Weather Service, we have a lot of people teleworking if they can, particularly on the management side, upper management, even some of our IT support and electricians type positions, electronic support, are trying to telework as much as possible. As far as operations goes, doing the forecasting for the airports, providing support for our partners, all of the severe weather outbreaks, all of that. I say business as usual. We're washing our hands more. We're spraying down the workstations. We're trying not to sit next to each other. So we're trying to practice social distancing and disinfect as much as we can. But we're going to bring in everybody that we need to work a severe weather event or a tornado outbreak. And it kind of comes down to risk. If we have the potential for big tornadoes to start wiping people out, there's a point where that risk potentially, particularly if we can't warn for it, that risk is going to become pretty big and be a pretty big threat to life and property. And, right alongside the pandemic, that needs to be addressed. So, we bring in everybody that we need on the operational side to handle the big events, just like we normally would for the pandemic.
So, Tim, you were in Jonesboro just recently in the past few days surveying. Did you notice any effects of the COVID-19 outbreak and how that influenced storm surveying as well as storm recovery?
Well, the people there were very cognizant of the stay-at-home order, but they also wanted to go out and see the damage. So there was, two types of people out there. There were people who did stay home, and then there were people who were out in their cars taking cell phone pictures of the damage and destruction. The police were all over there, and funny because talking to the police there, one police officer shook my hand, and then we both thought, wait a minute now, we shouldn't be doing that. And then other officers would say, well, we could just, say hi or something like that. And that's great. So there was some of that. And then the hotel I stayed at up in Jonesboro, they said that before the tornado, they had 20% occupancy. But then after the tornado, it went to 60%, and they expected to be sold out as more first responders and contractors come into town. So in a way, it brings back some business.
Absolutely. Wow, that's scary stuff. It's the worst case scenario that a major tornado goes through a populated area at a time like this. And obviously that's awful no matter when, even when there's no virus wreaking havoc through the world. But that's just awful for those folks. Over to you, Scotty.
Thank you, Evan. Tim, I want to keep you up and bring Kevin in as well. Tim, you were able to kind of go through Nashville, Tennessee, look at this tornado damage that went through downtown. That was pre-COVID-19, before everything kind of shut down. You was in Jonesboro after COVID-19. So you did storm surveys on both. So I want to ask you, how are those storm surveys different? Have you noticed anything? And then Kevin, I want to piggyback that off to you as how will the Weather Service conduct these storm surveys when we're in this time of social distancing? So Tim, I'll throw it to you first.
Well, as far as Nashville and then Jonesboro is concerned, I was still able to get around without any problems whatsoever. I was able to do my survey without any problem. I do a lot of walking as well, and I have all the credentials with me. So, I have my hard hat on and I have a jacket on that says, that I'm a surveyor. So those kinds of things, people recognize me as somebody who's supposed to be essential out there doing the job. And that's what I do. So I've had no problems with it myself. And like I was saying earlier, there's two kinds of people out there in the Jonesboro area, those that stayed home and those that went out and took a look at the damage. And it wasn't anything too bad because it's a rural town, and it didn't have the hundreds of people that have had it or died from it yet. And so it wasn't really that impactful to a lot of the people I spoke with. They didn't realize the full extent of it, I don't think, like some of the bigger cities have. It's because they're out 2 hours from Little Rock, for example, and they're out in the country, and they don't have the concentration of COVID positive cases as something like Little Rock.
Very well. And Kevin, with you guys doing out National Weather Service storm surveys, I know you got the credentials and stuff, but sometimes you maybe interview or interact with homeowners and business owners and things like that. Is there any guidelines that are changing during this COVID-19 period?
Yeah, so luckily we haven't had anything to survey yet out here in Idaho. Certainly less severe weather than the plains, which makes it a little bit nicer. But, storm surveys are a responsibility of the Weather Service, usually a lot of times in conjunction with local emergency management and some other partners. And as they fall under operations, we're going to proceed forward with what we need to do. Certainly there's going to be social distancing. There's going to be an increased emphasis on safety and disinfecting and masks and things like that, just like everyone else is doing. So that's the main difference there, is that type of stuff is going to come into play in a pretty big way as we go out and do that. But storm surveys will continue. I'll mention too, since it relates to chasing and spotting, we've had to cancel our outreach. A lot of Weather Service offices are essentially locked down. We're not letting contractors in anymore. We're not we're not interacting with people who are delivering packages. We're not allowing tours or visits or any in-person meetings of any kind. And that includes the outreach we do out in the field, like Skywarn classes to train new spotters. So a lot of that has been canceled, and actually just about all outreach across the country for the Weather Service has been canceled or postponed until things get better in the course of this pandemic. We have increased, most offices have increased their virtual presence. Some offices are doing more virtual online Skywarn classes that people can dial into live. So there's been a little bit more of an emphasis there. And that's a trend that's been going on for years. A lot of offices have been starting to do that anyway. But that's certainly taken on a bigger role here during the pandemic, since we're avoiding all of that in-person contact.
So Kevin, if I was let's say this was my first year trying to get involved with severe weather, whether that's the information or the spotting or and I have to do most of that from home. What other things would you recommend that I could get into to be able to kind of enhance my knowledge and also my ability to report from my local area for home? Things such as CoCoRaHS or MPing, anything like that you can think of?
Yeah. So there are two ways to look at this. One, business as usual as far as reporting for local spotters. If you're going to work, if you're at home, you see severe weather. Before we wanted to know about it, we still want to know about it. And it's certainly, a safe social distancing activity as far as reporting electronically or over the phone. CoCoRaHS is great. We use that data at the Weather Service offices across the country routinely for precipitation events. So getting involved in CoCoRaHS, whether the pandemic was happening or not, is certainly something that's encouraged. Getting involved in your local Skywarn program and becoming a spotter, certainly encouraged. And then there's other technologies out there such as Spotter Network and MPing that are both pretty popular among the spotter and chaser community. And those are fair game as well during the pandemic. So if you haven't gotten involved in Spotter Network, there's a training that you can take online to get involved there, and that's a way to submit reports. And those reports do process into a lot of our systems at the Weather Service offices, like NWS Chat and some of our other systems. And then on the MPing side, MPing, it can be a little less useful at times depending on the category you're using. In terms of whether we can directly use that for storm verification. So, for example, if you're reporting quarter-size hail in MPing, perfect. A lot of Weather Service offices have started using that data on a regular basis in an official capacity. Some of the wind damage categories in MPing are a little more binned. They're a little more broad and not very specific, and that isn't always the most helpful as far as verification goes. But remember, MPing is being used for research by the NSSL, by OU, and I believe SIMS is involved in well. So outside the Weather Service, there's a lot of applications for the MPing data. So that's still a great, valuable way to report. And they're still looking to really push that and get more and more reporting through MPing. Utilizes crowdsourcing to really provide its value. So all of these are on the table, regardless of whether there was a pandemic or not. And we certainly encourage people to continue to take those routes and get involved if you're interested in getting
Tim,
involved.
in years past, you've been involved in projects such as Vortex 2 and more recently Rotate. How might this diminish travel and being more careful about what you do while you're out chasing? How might all of those things affect severe weather research this season?
Well, there will be no project this year for me. I was informed that the folks that are in charge, Josh and Karen, lost funding, unfortunately, with NSF, so there's not going to be any kind of program this year. But they have asked me in past years to go along with them and to serve as one of the lead probe vehicles out there to deploy those instrumented pods. And the reason for that is because of my long years of experience and how I have this passion for getting up right in front of tornadoes. And we've had some good success over the years with them. It's just I wish it would go every year instead of kind of waiting on the whims of funding. But I guess that's the way it works. So there won't be a project this spring, but I'll be out. I'm always out every spring, have been since 1978, and I will continue to go out and chase.
Brett, I want to talk to you. I know you, Live Storms Media, you guys are out shooting video and different media outlets contact you about that. Do you think that might be a bigger thing this year to kind of break the COVID-19 news cycle, people wanting to see something besides the coronavirus with severe weather video?
It's already been that way. We've been kind of noticing an uptick lately. A couple of other issues, though, with it. Unfortunately, some of our clients, particularly within the CBS News headquarters in New York City, have actually died of COVID. So it has created internal challenges on the administration side for the bigger networks. As you can imagine, treating their people and covering the story as much as they can. Another issue that we have actually ran into this year is we covered the Eufaula, Alabama tornado last week as it roared through. And, you know, your first thoughts are to get out, check on people, number one. Number two, when people start talking to you and coming up and telling you about how the storm was, and then, you know, from my media background, my perspective is, okay, well, would you like to do an interview? And it's very, very hard for me to try and retrain myself. Wait, you know, I can't mic this person up, or we're going to have to take a different approach. We're trying to stay 6 feet back. Well, the boom mic pick up the audio, you know, those type of things. So the actual coverage element has had to change overall as well due to COVID. But back to your original question, yes, we've seen an uptick in weather video. I think really and truly, you know, there's so much doom and gloom with the curve and the number of fatalities nationwide, the number of cases, that anything that is different that's going on television, people are kind of glued to, because they know the seriousness of the situation, but they're getting burned out on hearing about it.
Definitely so. Well, I know we're running up on the hour. I want to invite you guys to stick around for just a little bit more. We're going to do a weather roundtable. But before we do that, I would love to give you an opportunity to promote any website, social media that folks can follow you on. Mike, I'll start with you first. How can people keep track with you as we get into the storm chasing season?
I mean, pretty much, unless it's something called TikTok, which I've never understood what that is, you can find me. So Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and my name for my website and all that. But if you Google my name, you'll probably find it.
I think we may see Mike on TikTok before long. Tim, how about you?
Well, I'm on Spotter Network. When a storm gets going, then I put my beacon on, but not until my target storm is going. So people cannot follow me until there's a target storm there. And I'm on Facebook. That's the only social media I'm on. Even though I do have a Twitter handle of Tornado, I don't really post very much on Twitter. So it's best to follow me on Facebook. I put out a forecast in the morning if I'm going chasing, and I show kind of the setup and show you my target. So that's not done by too many other chasers, but that's what I do. So at least they have an idea of where I'll be in the afternoon.
I always enjoy seeing your Facebook posts, drawing the target area of where you are headed towards. Brett, how about you? How can we follow you?
Yeah, we're on Facebook. Obviously, I have a personal Facebook, but Live Storms Media, you can see all kind of cool videos, and then the YouTube channel, Alabama Storm Tracker on Twitter. And if you got an iPhone, Android device, which most people do these days, the live chasing app. That's one thing where people are going to be able to get some entertainment. We're going to have a lot of new live streamers streaming storms this year, and we're going to be running on livestormchasing.com. Also, lots of cool new features coming as we go through the season.
And then, Kevin, if we find ourselves in Idaho up in your area, how can we follow you?
Well, unfortunately, you know, with my focus always being on calling in reports, and that's been, you know, always been kind of my core focus. I haven't really dabbled much into having social media pages for people to follow me on, so not super helpful there. I have a personal Facebook page. I post some photos and video, mostly for friends and family, and I'm on Spotter Network. So for the chaser community and the spotter community, you will see my beacon moving around when I'm out on chases on Spotter Network. I'll toss out there too, since I don't have a personal page that's public. You know, the last question I kind of said, well, there's two different things here. One of them, like I talked about, is the spotting and chasing side and calling in reports. But for people who are home teleworking right now, or maybe just have more free time on their hands because they are isolated because of the pandemic, one way to get involved if you want to expand your knowledge a little bit in the world of weather, weather.gov/learning. is one of our official websites where we've collected together a lot of different things. So some of it designed for children, some of it designed for everybody. And I believe there's links to like Comet Med Ed and some different programs in there where actually you can take Skywarn spotter training online and get that to your local office. But a lot of different resources there for anyone looking to pick up a little extra knowledge or learn a little more about weather if you have extra time at home during the pandemic.
climatologically, this is the prime time for severe weather in the South. So we'll definitely be keeping our eyes on that. And James, today, the National Weather Service, NOAA, Weather Ready Nation ambassadors, all were promoting Safe Place Day, Safe Place Selfie Day. I'll say it that right the second time. Safe Place Selfie Day. And so, James, I know you were able to capture a few selfies.
Yes, the first one comes to us from the National Weather Service in Greenville, Spartanburg, making mention of social distancing. Have you thought about where your safe place is at work? For that point in time when we actually went to work. For them, it would be their break room, which doubles as their storm shelter. And you'll notice that it is empty here, as we've talked about with so many of them working from home. This guy's going to look real familiar to you. Here's Scotty Powell in his, is this a basement closet, Scotty?
This is the basement bathroom, yeah.
Yeah, you got your helmet on, which is good. You have your tools, and loyal viewers of the show will know that we've actually seen Scotty reporting live from this space while seeking shelter, so we're used to seeing that wood paneling there behind him. And then...
Remind me, it happened about this time last year, right?
Yes, I believe
we were talking about that earlier.
A year ago, coming up, not the 16th, because that's a different tornado outbreak, but it was about a year ago that all took place. And then here's my picture. We moved into our new house a couple months ago, and I'm still trying to figure out where everything is, but we have this really nice space under the stairs, and I was going to pose with my emergency hand crank radio, because it's important that when you go into a shelter, you can continue to receive information, but it's actually acting as the flashlight in this particular photo. So it's not too late. If you have not already taken your picture, you can send it using hashtag #SafePlaceSelfie. And it's just always good to know exactly where you're going to go, how you're going to get there, and if you're like me, make sure you clean the space out, clean the closet out, maybe the day or so ahead of time so you can get in there in a moment's notice. Scotty, back over to you.
Yeah, so we have a couple of days. We'll be watching that severe weather possible setup over the weekend. So that's all for tonight. Next week, we're going to be talking about the April 16th, 2011 tornado outbreak in the Carolinas. So be sure to tune in next week. We all hope you have a great Easter weekend. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time here on the Carolina Weather Group. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. We're happy to have you on this Wednesday evening. We're going to be talking with Dr. Phil Klotzbach, meteorologist and professor out at Colorado State University, as well as Mr. Carl Schreck, who works for NC State University. You've also probably heard him associated with NOAA up in the Asheville office. So, Carl, a fellow North Carolinian on the show tonight, and we're going to be talking about some research that they've put together, and they are trying to get a little momentum behind of this theory of classifying hurricanes not by the traditional way of wind speed, but more of surface pressure. And that is something that we've seen over the past couple of years with, you guys know, living here in the Carolinas, we've had our fair share of tropical weather. So as always, we appreciate you following along. And if you have any comments throughout the show, feel free to drop them in the respective outlets that you're watching on tonight. So, Phil, we've had you on the show several times. We're happy to have you back. Carl, this is the first time for you, so I'll start with you first. Kind of give us the background of your weather history, and then Phil, I'll turn it back to you and let you kind of give our audience a little bit of background behind you too. So, Carl, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for having me on the show tonight. So I grew up right down there in Raleigh, North Carolina, and one of my pivotal moments was in high school when Hurricane Fran made landfall in Wilmington, followed I-40 right up to Raleigh, and just the power of that storm and all the damage that it caused and the power outages and missing school for 2 weeks, which seems like nothing now, but back then that was a big deal. So decided to go on to grad school, and
this day, my parents don't understand why I went from North Carolina up to Albany, New York to study tropical weather. But Albany is actually kind of one of the hot spots for tropical meteorology. And I did my PhD, master's and PhD in tropical meteorology up there, mainly large-scale things, equatorial waves. And
We'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Getting tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.
On subseasonal scales. And then managed to find my way back here to North Carolina, where I got a postdoc out here in beautiful Asheville, working for NC State University, but at the National Climate Data Center at that time, NCDC. It's since been renamed the National Centers for Environmental Information. Yeah, we're kind of like the research arm of NCEI, doing some of the more fun researchy stuff.
And Phil, for those who may have not caught you on a program that you've been on with us before, you study hurricanes, but out in Colorado, so kind of tie all this together and let us know a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I grew up in Massachusetts, right on the coast in Plymouth, and so when I was 5 years old, Hurricane Gloria came into Connecticut. But even though it was about 150 miles away from where I grew up, it still had pretty significant impacts there, and that was I've always been kind of really fascinated by the weather, but that's really what got me focused more on hurricanes. And then I did my undergraduate at Bridgewater State in Massachusetts in geography, and then I've done some research on seasonal prediction as an undergraduate, and so I applied to go to CSU, where Bill Gray was, and he accepted me, and I was very, very, very excited to go work with Bill Gray, because he's kind of a legend in the field of tropical meteorology and everything, and I went out to CSU in 2000, and I've been working at CSU ever since, so I've been doing seasonal forecasting, part of the team for 18 years now, and if you were to ask Bill Gray why I forecast hurricanes in Colorado, he would say it's because a storm surge can't get you at 5,000 feet.
That is very true. That is very true. Well, Dan, I think you're going to kick off the topics, so go ahead.
We want to talk a little bit about surface pressure in relation to how hurricane damage is assessed. Currently, hurricanes are based mostly on wind speed, but it would be great if you could tell us a little bit more about how the pressure is actually related to the hurricane damage assessments, or how that comes into play at all, other than just forecasting.
Yeah, so this was some work, and some of this actually came a little bit motivated from me growing up in the Northeast U.S., where the Hurricane Center has been reanalyzing all those historical hurricanes, and all my major hurricanes from New England are gone. They're taking them away. They know they're only Category 2s by wind speed. And so, if you look at hurricanes hitting in the East Coast, especially from, say, like Georgia northward, the Carolinas, especially as you get up in New England, their structure is somewhat different from a canonical hurricane like the ones you normally see, like a hurricane hitting Texas or Florida. As these hurricanes move further up the coast, they tend to get somewhat elongated. They're a little less symmetric looking. Sometimes they're not particularly, you wouldn't have those on your wall behind you framed as a picture of what a hurricane looks like. But these kind of big sprawly hurricanes often have a significant amount of damage associated with them. And so basically, if you're thinking about a hurricane, and I think Sandy's probably the best example. I know Sandy was officially post-tropical when it made landfall, but up to about 2 or 3 hours before, it was still classified as tropical. It was a Category 1 by wind. Wind's only about 65, 70 knots, but the pressure was down around 942, 943 millibars, which is an incredibly low pressure. And so the reason the winds weren't that strong was because basically you had a very low pressure in the center, but Sandy, as you know, was an enormously large storm. And so that pressure gradient, the gradient and pressure was spread out over a very large area. And so basically we find that pressure is more of an integrated metric of the storm. So your max wind gives you the strongest wind anywhere in a hurricane, whereas pressure gives you kind of the overall broader intensity of the storm, how large the storm is, because size is very important when it comes to the storm surge. If you have a larger storm, it tends to have a larger storm surge associated with it. And in our paper, we kind of talk about both Charlie and Katrina, how you had Charlie, which was a Category 4 by wind, a tight little storm, very damaging, very devastating, but over a very small area, had very little storm surge, even though it went into one of the most storm surge prone parts of the US. Whereas Katrina, obviously we all know what it did in New Orleans, but even say the levees it held in New Orleans have been 100% fine, killed several hundred people on the Mississippi coastline with a storm surge that approached 28 feet. Because even though its winds were slightly lower, it had a low pressure, 920 millibars. So we argue from our pressure classification scale that Katrina actually would have been a Category 5 hurricane. And consequently, if you look at the damage from Katrina, even putting aside the New Orleans damage, certainly had the damage more you would expect with the Category 5, just basically complete devastation and surge going miles inland.
And so, Carl, we're talking about categories. This is all based off of the Sapphire-Simpson scale currently. Can you just give us a brief rundown? I know it's not all, not quite as complicated as perhaps the pressure categories you guys have produced. But can you just give us a rundown of the Sapphire-Simpson scale?
Yeah, so the Sapphire-Simpson scale was developed back in the, I think it was the 60s, based mainly on damage assessments, and it was tied very much to the wind speed. Originally, it was set for wind speed, pressure, and storm surge, but as the decades went on, they started to realize that those aren't always one-to-one. So the Hurricane Center is really narrowed in on using just the wind speed to define each level of the scale, going from 1 to 5. And it's convenient because it's an easy way to communicate to people how strong the storm is with just a single number, but it can also be misleading, and so, some of them are spaced closer together than others, and so there's a little bit of kind of statistical noise with it as well. And so that was all part of why a lot of folks have really been starting to turn away from this really simple, just based on the maximum wind speed. Folks have been trying to come up with better and better metrics to identify different hazards like the rainfall or the storm surge that aren't really well captured by the winds. And also it's the winds at the center of the storm, or the strongest winds in the storm, and that doesn't really give you an idea of the size of the storm. And so one of the most popular alternatives to just using the wind speed is something called IKE, or integrated kinetic energy, that takes kind of the whole disk of the storm and kind of adds up all of the wind speeds throughout the size and really takes into account that size. But the issue there is that you need to know the full wind field, and that's very rarely possible, especially as you go back farther. So that's one of the reasons why we really like the pressure. I mean, no single number is going to give you a great estimate of how strong a storm is, but we think if you've got to use a single number, that the pressure seems to integrate a lot more things and is a lot easier to calculate than some of the alternatives.
But the nice thing with pressure is we measure it every time we fly a plane through a hurricane. We measure the pressure, and we have that number in real time. So basically, the nice thing is someone who's TV meteorologist or emergency manager can see, here's the current pressure, look at the scale and know what it is exactly, as opposed to having to wait for a model analysis for IKE. And that's the thing, is we need something we have in real time. And basically in real time, Hurricane Center has wind and pressure. And we argue also you can measure pressure a whole heck of a lot better than you can measure wind, both with aircraft and especially on the ground during a hurricane. Obviously, we all know anemometers tend to crash and burn in strong winds right when we want them. So
your research, is this at the point where we could see this becoming the new scale in the near future?
I don't know. I mean, I think the general public, I think we do need a scale for hurricane intensity. I think you need a 1 to 5 scale. I mean, you look at whether it's a hurricane, a tornado, or even just like storms, you'll see TV stations will categorize it under 1 to 5. I think really what we find is that it gives you an overall better indication of, one, how much damage the storm is likely to cause. If you look at the historical relationship between wind and damage versus pressure and damage, pressure works better. And we've seen that. You see it also with fatalities. The storms with lower pressures have higher fatalities compared with the storms with lower. I mean, higher winds cause higher fatalities too, but the relationship is better with pressure than it is with wind. When it comes to storm surge in general, lower pressures, you're going to see higher storm surges, even with a stronger relationship than you do with wind. And one of the big things we've seen is a pushback against Sapphire-Simpson in the last, say, 10 to 12 years, as with these large storms like Ike and Sandy doing a lot more damage than we would expect from the category. But if we were categorizing them by pressure, we wouldn't necessarily have that strong pushback, because they've actually worked pretty well. When you look at the pressures, they correlate really well with the damage. And obviously, all we're looking at is the storm itself. We're not looking at where the storm is making landfall, because obviously if a storm makes landfall in a major metropolitan area like Miami or Houston, it's going to do more damage than if it makes landfall in a much sparsely populated area. So just simply looking at the pressure, we can explain about 55-60% of the variability in the damage, not even knowing where the storm is going to make landfall.
So for a rapidly intensifying hurricane, would this provide any more, any better communication tools, or how would this apply to a storm perhaps like Michael that was rapidly intensifying as it approached the Florida coastline?
When it comes to rapidly intensifying storms, it should work about equally whether you're using wind or pressure. I would say typically your pressure is going to, you may see the pressure fall. The pressure often will fall just ahead of where the winds pick up, so it might give you a little bit of extra notice. I think a lot of what you find is that pressure works well for these storms. I would say that pressure is going to work a little more robustly than wind when you have an eye wall replacement cycle. Because when you have an eye wall replacement cycle, the storm grows in size, the winds come down, but the pressure will maybe go up a scooch, but it's not necessarily going to go up. You're not going to see as big a dramatic a variation in the pressure as you do the wind. And so often when these storms go through eye wall replacement cycles, it's like, oh good, the winds are coming down, but the pressure is staying the same or even going down at the same time. And so it's not, things are getting better, it's the storm's getting larger. And basically kind of the way I always figure it is that the pressure's falling, there's other things that come into play, but in general, if the pressure's falling, the storm's either the winds are picking up, the storm's getting larger, or a combination of both, all of which is bad. We saw this a bit with Hurricane Dorian last year, is that once it emerged from the Bahamas, it was kind of, it had weakened, the winds had come down and the pressure had gone up. But then we had a few hours where the winds were still coming down and the pressure was actually dropping at the same time. And so you kind of see the wording that the Hurricane Center was using where it's like, okay, the category may have come down, but the storm is growing in size, so it's not like the risk is getting any lower. And so I think that's why we argue it's a smoother and more continuous function than is the wind overall. It's a lot less volatile. And again, I think really one of the key things is we measure it a whole heck of a lot better too.
Well, and you touched on earlier how the winds were, they're always going to be concentrated kind of in a smaller area. The strongest winds, as where the wind field itself can be a lot larger and still be very damaging. And how does, assigning a number to a hurricane, a category number, obviously when it comes to research purposes, you're going to be able to look at a lot more factors. But when it comes to emergency management and assisting funds that are associated with these storms, can either of you speak to, how putting a number to that storm might affect that system if you have a 4 versus a 2, and how many funds you would be able to get from that, and why it would get better to have a better rating system?
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly how the numbers are used in that scenario. I know that like the Hurricane Center has been increasingly trying to kind of de-emphasize the Sapphire-Simpson scale. So like if you look at the warning graphics, the cone of uncertainty, nowhere on there, you have to really dig pretty hard to find the Sapphire-Simpson category. It may not actually be in there usually. They usually just give the wind speed and the pressure. They'll put, hurricane, major hurricane, which is category 3 or greater, but they don't really get beyond that because people seem to focus too much on the category, and they'll see, like Florence as it was approaching Wilmington, we've got downgraded from a category 4 to a category 2, but we all knew that the rain threat wasn't going away at all. And with pressure, the downgrade wouldn't have been as significant. So really where the Hurricane Center seems to be moving is, and I think this is similar to other parts of the Weather Service, where it's really worn on hazard instead of worn on the hurricane itself. So they're really more focused on having this custom suite of different storm surge products and wind products going farther inland, and the rainfall and the flooding, like having each individual component warned on. And that's really, I think that's what the emergency managers probably really need, because they really care about what's going to happen in their county, not necessarily what's happening at the coastline if you're not, right there on the beach. But if you're on the nightly news, going through all those details is going to take a lot longer than you probably have. And so that's why boiling things down to just one number still is valuable. It's just a matter of trying to figure out what one number is going to be the best for it. And we think this is a better solution, but we'll see how quickly people pick up on it.
Have you guys looked at applying this to typhoons in the Pacific or any other basin?
I would love to do that, but unfortunately we don't have really independent pressure measurements from wind. So in the Western Pacific, almost all the assessments are based on satellite. So they have basically what's known as the Dvorak scale, intensity estimation scale. And basically it and all its derivatives are based off of satellite presentation, and then they assign a wind and a pressure based on that. So unfortunately, the Atlantic is really the only basin we have independent pressure measurements to actually be able to do this analysis. We actually do have aircraft recon that goes back from 1950 to 1987 in the Western North Pacific. Unfortunately, I don't think, Carl, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the pressure is archived in the best track, though, unfortunately. So the statistics at the end of the year, basically the Hurricane Center or the Joint Typhoon Warning Center in the Western North Pacific will go through and reassess the storm, maybe tweak its location slightly, or maybe change its intensities. And so in the Atlantic, they archive the position, the wind, and the pressure. In the Western North Pacific, they only archive the wind speeds.
So the other really interesting thing that Phil was touching on there with the West Pacific is, so the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, their best track historical data only reports the wind for most of the record. But we do have the pressure fixes from recon data. And the really ironic thing is those winds that are reported in the best track were almost never measured. Because if you think about it, right now, most of the winds that we get are primarily coming from dropsons. And, we look back in the 50s, we found a schematic of what a dropson looked like in the 1950s. It literally had a record player in it, like a turntable dropping down out of the sky. How accurate do you think that was for measuring the wind speeds? Not very. So, really what they were doing for most of the recon era in the West Pacific was they were actually measuring the central pressure and then using their best guess of a wind pressure relationship to estimate the winds from that pressure, because the only way they could really measure the winds was to look down at the ocean and see how much spray was coming off of the waves. And again, not a very accurate way to do things.
My, how the technology has changed. You guys have poured a lot of time and effort into this research. If some of our followers who are watching tonight, they want to kind of look at the research, where can they find that at? Where's the best spot?
So it's been accepted. It's currently in early online review for publication. So you can view it. It's currently the way it was accepted, the way it's currently formatted. They'll actually put a nice new formatting on it. It was supposed to come out in April, but I still haven't seen the final version. So I suspect it's now going to be May. We have some other stuff going on in the world, so a lot of stuff has been delayed. If you search Phil Klotzbach, Carl Schreck, and wind pressure, you'll definitely find it from that. There's not a lot of us roaming around.
Well, gentlemen, we certainly appreciated your time tonight talking about this as we get into the tropical season. I know there's a lot of conversations going on in the weather industry about the Sapphire-Simpson scale, maybe adapting or changing a little bit. I think tonight you've got a little bit of an idea of what a future scale may look like as we go throughout the next few years. So, gentlemen, we certainly appreciate your time, and hopefully this tropical season will be a little bit quieter. But if not, when you hear about surface pressure, hopefully tonight's episode will kind of give you a better idea about how we're determining the damages that these hurricanes could cause. So thank you for watching the Carolina Weather Group. Hope you have a great evening, and we will see you back here next time. To the Carolina Weather Group. This is show number 305, and we're very happy to have Mr. Tom Nizzle on with us. You've probably seen Tom on the Weather Channel. He's a winter weather expert. has since retired, but finds himself close to the Carolinas. And we are happy to have Tom here as we're in the heart of winter weather season. We thought, well, it's appropriate to have Tom on. So, Tom, welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. We're happy to have you on with us this evening.
It's great to be with y'all. And, I'm originally from up north in Buffalo, New York, but now I'm right next door to you, just across the border in a place called Roan Mountain, Tennessee.
Yes, Roan Mountain, Tennessee. You've probably heard about that on the show here. Ricky Matthews, meteorologist up in the Bristol, Tennessee area, talks about Roan Mountain, as does Evan Fisher, who goes up several times throughout the winter season to do some snow chases. So you've heard about Roan Mountain, so now you can kind of put a face with the place tonight. So, Tom, you have been dubbed the winter weather expert at the Weather Channel. You work for the National Weather Service. You've been able to develop some weather programs, some tools. Kind of talk to us about your weather journey. How did you catch the weather bug? Kind of go through with us on your journey and how you got to each stop along that journey.
Yeah, well, thank you. And again, thanks for having me on. This is an honor. Like so many of you that are in tune to this podcast, you're weather geeks, right? You're weather weenies, and something turned you on at some point in your life. For me, coming from Buffalo, New York, of course, they say up there's two seasons, July 4th and winter. And we, of course, really got to enjoy winter as kids. I also lived very close to the Buffalo airport. And when I was a little one, there were 10 boys in my neighborhood. My dad used to load all the kids into the car and go over to the airport to watch airplanes. And we'd park next to this crazy-looking building. It had a little dome on top of it. And while the rest of my friends were watching the airplanes, that building was the upper air site for the Buffalo Weather Office, and that's where they sent up the weather balloons. And I got interested in weather just by watching the technicians taking readings and sending up balloons. And my love of winter weather, of course, was in my DNA. Because when you live in Buffalo, you learn to enjoy the snow and get out and play in it. So it's kind of my beginnings.
And Tom, talking about winter weather, before we kind of transition into more conversationally, winter weather is different. You said you grew up in Buffalo, you're kind of used to it. Now you live here in the South in Tennessee, where the mountains of Tennessee obviously sees more snow than when, let's say, you lived in Atlanta, Georgia. So can you talk a little bit about the differences of how people perceive snow maybe in Buffalo compared to here in the Southeast?
Well, yeah, it is fascinating. And, when I lived up north, we used to, and I mean this in sort of a respectful way, but we would laugh at the people down south having all kinds of problems with a few inches of snow. Well, then I moved down to Atlanta, and we got a couple of interesting events with only a couple of inches of snow, but temperatures below 32 degrees that turned that snow immediately into ice. Atlanta's a pretty hilly area. I came from flatlands up in Buffalo, and I very quickly found out that when there's no salt to salt the roads and treat the roads, and you're in hilly conditions, I don't care how good a driver you are, you're going to be stranded. You can't get around in that kind of weather. And so it's not as much that people are wimpy in the South and can't handle the snow. You're just not set up for it. So it was a really interesting education to me. But it was also fascinating when I first got to the Weather Channel that when we would talk about snow in the South, I would kind of just push it off like, yeah, there's going to be a little bit down here. And everybody would say, no. That's the point. All you have to say is the word snow, and it puts everyone into a panic.
Ain't that the truth? The time, that we're talking about this, we just recently had a snow scare here in Charleston. Somebody, a snowflake showed up on the app and everybody freaked out. So it's, I get it. I lived down here a long time, and it just freaks everybody out. So let's talk a little bit about you started, you really got your big time in weather before you came to the Weather Channel. You were at the National Weather Service up in Buffalo. You were up there, did a lot of really, a lot of really cool things that we're going to talk about here later in the show, such as Buff Kid, and but also naming winter storms was something that came out of the Buffalo office, as I recall. I want to talk a little bit about that and just how that, and just your time up there and how the winter storm names came to be.
Well, let's start with career real quickly here. It's great to be in the right place at the right time. When I graduated from college with a bachelor's degree out of State University of New York in Oswego, one of the lake effect snow capitals of the world, I worked research for about 3 years in the Buffalo area in atmospheric science, and then transferred over to, at that time, the Weather Bureau, now the National Weather Service office in Buffalo. And, immediately began this interest in lake effect snow, this crazy type of snowstorm where it can be snowing in one part of your town with 2 feet of snow and 10 miles.
We'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Getting tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. Help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.
I was born and raised with that, but I didn't understand it that well. So getting into the Weather Service office in Buffalo really sprang my career into learning more about lake effect snow. And, as I went through that career there, a 32-year career, I went from a forecaster to a science officer and eventually the meteorologist in charge there in Buffalo. Great time, just a wonderful time to work in an office where so many people had an interest in winter weather. And, we developed a lot of tools to help predict winter weather.
So tell me a little bit about, you worked on some really innovative things, including BuffKit. And BuffKit is, we love it here for fog prediction, smoke dispersal, things like that. Talk a little bit about, what that was like, seeing that get off the ground and how that has been applied across the weather enterprise.
Yeah, BuffKit. It's a fascinating story about a tool that was developed by forecasters for forecasters in the operational environment. Way back when I started in the Weather Service, there were only very basic computer models with very basic information. But in getting to network with people from Washington, D.C., we were able to pull much more data out of the computers at Washington and be able to develop programs that would display that information and that data, forecast information on an hourly basis from computer models that up to the point in my career, you only got information and weather forecast at 12-hour intervals at just the mandatory levels in the atmosphere. So we had this plethora of tremendous amounts of data that were coming into our offices, but no way to really display them. And we developed this tool called BuffKit. I was in on the ground floor with the development of that. But the guy who was really responsible was a guy by the name of Ed Mahoney that still is in the National Weather Service at the Warning Decision Training Branch out in Norman, Oklahoma. Ed was an amazing programmer. Came in as our science officer to Buffalo. And over the course of about a year and a half, it turned into this magical laboratory right within the forecast office. We would say to Ed, we want a tool that's going to help us predict fog or maybe predict strong winds with momentum transfer down through the atmosphere. Ed would look at the data, go into his office, sit down at the computer like Scotty at the computer in the Enterprise, right? Just type away. And about 3 hours later, come out with another tool that we added to this toolkit designed in Buffalo, and hence the name BuffKit.
I wanted to get back into one of the topics that we brought up a little while ago, which was lake effect snow. So Buffalo being on the eastern side of Lake Erie, we all have heard stories about just some of the amazing amounts of snow that fall from lake effect snow in the Buffalo area. Specifically, a couple of years back, there was about 5 feet of snow that fell during one event. That it was forecast. It was a huge event. But talk to some of our viewers about what is lake effect snow and how you understood it in your office. How did you forecast for that?
Lake effect snow, of course, when we talk about lake effect, it's mainly in reference to the Great Lakes, though it can occur in bodies of water all around the world. Essentially, they're a snowstorm on about the scale of a summertime thunderstorm. So they can only sometimes be just a few miles wide across the length of a band of snow that comes off the lake itself. The snow develops as cold air comes across that relatively warm water of the Great Lakes. So you may be moving air at maybe 10 degrees Fahrenheit across a lake that's 40 degrees. You get a tremendous amount of latent heat release and heat and moisture that actually rise off the lake into that air. And as it continues to rising, cools, condenses into snow. And then the wind direction is what determines where that snow falls. So as the winds change direction, the snow band will move downwind of that. And that's what the big challenge is to predict lake effect snow. You got to think about the fact that you're predicting for one side of the city, maybe 2 feet of snow, whereas your friends that live on the other side of the city may see no snow at all. So it was a tremendous forecast challenge. And early on in my career, it was long before you guys were, some of you may be on the face of the earth, computer models were at a much lower resolution because you didn't have the computer power to work with these models. And some of these early models did not even see the Great Lakes. That is, the Great Lakes weren't even an input into the model. So they wouldn't even recognize the ability to predict or simulate a lake effect snowstorm. So early on, we actually had forecast methods that we used to predict these snows. And again, you see the Great Lakes there. These are huge bodies of water. I mean, they compose 20% of the fresh water in the world. I think about that. And I read a statistic on that. If you take all the water in the Great Lakes and you spread it across the entire United States, it would be 9 feet deep. So put that in your head and think about it. These are huge volumes of water, and they actually control the weather, and not only on a local scale, but on a regional scale across the eastern United States. And yes, and we may touch on this a little later, if you get the right wind direction off the Great Lakes, you can actually see lake effect snow down along the Appalachians.
Very, very interesting. So a little bit, I just want to dive a little bit more into this, right? Because we touched on what the lake effect snow is. Wind direction for Lake Erie. If you look at the length and the width of the lake, not so much the depth or the longitude, but the latitude, you think west-southwest winds. And then how do you forecast the time that it's going to occur? Say, like you said, 10 degree Fahrenheit air moving over 40-degree waters. At what point does that stop? We're looking at what kind of difference in the for maximum occurrence to happen, and then for how long is this going to occur? How do you know when the valve shuts off?
Yeah, it's a very interesting and important question there. I like the question. The question is, how long is it going to last? What's the intensity going to be, in addition to where it's going to occur? What's important is you need cold air moving across the Great Lakes, but that cold air has to be deep enough to allow clouds to grow to a great enough depth to produce snowfall. If the cold air is really, really shallow, like that cold air that dams here on the east side of the Appalachians and is really shallow, you're not going to develop the clouds to produce lake effect snow. So that's a very important parameter. As far as how long is it going to last, once again, once that layer of cold air becomes shallow enough that it gets squeezed out by high pressure that moves across the area and begins to produce subsidence, that will cut off the lake effect snow. But in any particular locale, any location, it's the wind direction that determines where the snow band is going to be. So that snow band may be going like crazy over your little suburb, your area, and as little as a 10-degree shift in wind, just like that, will kick the snow band 10 or 15 miles north of you or south of you, and you'll go into clear skies at times. So it's a very, very intricate set of parameters that produce lake effect snow. Again, temperature difference to get that heat and moisture off the lake, the depth of the cold air to allow clouds to grow, and then the wind direction, which determines where that will all occur. And if you put all those parameters together and keep the winds in one direction for a long period of time, then you get pasted with snow. If you're under that snow band, think about the fact that it can produce 4 to 6 inches of snow an hour. Put that snow band over you for about an 8-hour period, and you're looking at anywhere from 32 to 36 inches of snow.
Very insightful. Thank you for those answers. I got one more topic to ask you about, and then I'm going to hand this off to Scotty. Tell us about some of your most memorable winter events.
Being from up north, I probably can give you one a year from up there. But, and again, many of you too young to remember this, but one of the coldest winters on record in the eastern United States was back in the winter of 1976-77. And in January of 1977, everything came together in the right or wrong place, depending on how you would define it, at the right place at the right time into upstate New York, western New York off of Lake Erie, and produced a 5-day blizzard known as the Blizzard of 77 in Buffalo, New York. Unfortunately, 29 people died during the blizzard. Many of them were found frozen in their cars that had gotten covered over by snowfall from 5 days. And think about this, 5 days of blizzard conditions. Blizzard conditions that stranded people on roadways. Back then, you didn't have cell phones. You couldn't get on that phone and just call someone to help you. The conditions occurred with temperatures down near the freezing or the zero mark and wind chills down to 20 to 30 below zero. Anyone caught outside in that storm was in peril. And again, unfortunately, there were many, many people that died from that. That was probably the benchmark storm for me because the intensity and the duration of that event. But we've had other really interesting lake effect snow events that have occurred. Back in Christmas week of 2001, I was working at the office in Buffalo, and during that week, we picked up 82 inches of snow. And this wasn't in mountainous areas or areas that were not populated. It was right across the city of Buffalo, and that really put the city at a standstill for several days.
Tom, when you had a chance to go to the Weather Channel, your area of responsibility grew from upstate New York to the entire country. What was that learning curve like?
Oh man, what an education to go from forecasting for, several counties in a portion of the state, and then all of a sudden ending up being responsible for forecasts across the entire nation. At any one point in time, and I've had this happen more than once in my career there, I'd be covering a storm coming into the West Coast, pasting the Sierra with heavy snow, a second weather system that was developing a lee cyclogenesis coming off of the Rockies, and maybe a third weather system that was working up the East Coast to produce a Northeast snowstorm. As I got into that, I began to understand the United States as a whole and what an amazing natural laboratory it is for studying the weather. Check the map out here. This is what I use when I train the forecasters and meteorologists that are at the Weather Channel. There's several features in the United States that make this a great natural laboratory. We start with the mountains, the western and the eastern mountains. They not only, their elevations, trap a tremendous amount of cold air and wring moisture out, but they actually are responsible for developing their own storms. Lee cyclogenesis, low pressure systems that would develop either in Colorado area or across the Carolinas here and just off the coast to produce massive winter storms. All right, so you've got the mountains. The mountains kind of ring in the United States on either side here. And what they do is they take and they channel all of this cold air. That's the second ingredient you need for snow, right? Cold air and moisture. That cold air comes down unimpeded from Canada in across the United States and can get as far south as the coastal areas of the Gulf Coast. And that is just amazing. So here you have this continent. You've got the mountains to start. You've got the cold air that comes down from Canada. And now you've got three significant moisture sources to produce that snowfall. The Pacific Ocean, it hammers the Sierra in through the Cascades with the most snow that we see in the United States. Paradise Ranger Station up Mount Rainier in the Cascades gets over 1,000 inches of snow in some seasons. Think about that fact. Now, that's your first source of moisture coming off the Pacific. Your second source is the Gulf of Mexico. What an amazing source of moisture that comes northward into that cold air and is responsible for the tremendous snowstorms we see from Colorado working its way right up into the Great Lakes region. And down in the southern United States, that cold air can be shallow enough that the Gulf air rides over it to produce some major ice storms. And then we've got our next feature, and that is the Atlantic Ocean. We're all familiar with that because that's what's going to fuel a lot of the snow that occurs here along the east coast of the United States. And by the way, what I call the turbocharger is the Gulf Stream. That'll take that storm that's really firing up off the Carolinas and infuse it with so much more energy that it really cranks as it develops into a nor'easter going up into New England. So all in all, that education in the 7 years at the Weather Channel taught me just how amazing the United States is and the North American continent for producing winter weather.
Tom, let's take a little bit of that and translated into the Southeast here in the Carolinas, Tennessee, Virginia, Georgia. For us to get winter weather here, you kind of talked a little bit about the CAD situation. What are our typical setups? We hear Miller A, Miller B systems. Talk to us about what we need to see here in the Southeast to get a winter storm.
Well, again, I always talk about two ingredients, right? You need cold air and you need moisture. And it doesn't have to be exceptionally cold air. It just has to be cold enough. But my gosh, that temperature profile in the atmosphere, where the air is cold and where the air is warm, means everything as to the type of precipitation you get. Now, you get across the Carolinas in the Southeast, you're east of the Appalachian Range. And so very often you will end up seeing events that set up that bring really cold air from New England down along the east side of the Appalachians. And many of us are familiar with the term cold air damming or the wedge. That cold air that slides down, it's very shallow. It's kind of like molasses. It moves its way down along the east side of the Appalachians and it sits in there. All right, there's ingredient number one. We've got the cold air. If the cold air is really, really shallow, then that can be a real serious issue for the Carolinas. Because ingredient number two is typically going to be a system that is coming somewhere out of the Gulf of Mexico. When we talk about the Miller Type A, Miller Type B systems, but let's keep it even more basic than that. Low pressure system coming out of the Gulf of Mexico is bringing all of this moisture northward along the east coast of the U.S. And it's not exceptionally cold. There's a lot of moisture there, but it's relatively warm. Oftentimes, we see in the Carolinas that this moist air will move northeastward along the coast. And what I've got next to me is one of the most interesting storms I had looked at in the years that I had worked with snowstorms and ice storms along the southeastern part of the United States. And this storm is back from December 2nd through 4th. And I think this was back in, trying to look at the exact date on there. I can't see it on there. I think it was 2002.
That's right.
This is one of the worst ice storms that occurred in the southeastern United States in many, many decades. In fact, in the Raleigh area, I think you had over an inch of ice that occurred from this storm. There were hundreds of thousands of people without power. I believe there were 24 deaths attributed to this storm. But it's a classic setup from a meteorological standpoint here. You've got very cold air to the north of that storm. It comes down along the east side of the Appalachians. It's very shallow. You bring warm, moist air above that. What will happen is snow starts high up in the atmosphere. It melts as it comes down into that warmer air. And then when it hits that cold air right near the surface, it ends up hitting anything that's below the freezing mark and instantly freezing. And because there was so much moisture with this storm, it moved relatively slowly, so there was a long duration. That combination of cold air at the surface and warm air aloft produced what again was an epic ice storm there.
As of here in January, mid to late January, much of the East Coast, Southeast, I would even say the Tennessee Valley, has not really seen a lot of winter weather. We've had really warm conditions. As we go back, I know for a lot of locations,